Our project is on China's economy and trade by Tyler, Omead, James, Eric, and Diana. A brief historical background of China. In 1921, there was the foundation of the Communist Party in China. In 1949, there was the fall of Nanking, which affected the capital and the People's Republic of China. In 1953, China's five-year plan consisted of social and economic reforms. In 1978, they implemented new economic reforms. As of November 2013, there is a new president.
Some of the major resources in China include rice, wheat, barley, fish, coal, aluminum, and hydroelectric power. China is labor-intensive in factors of production, which according to the Heckscher-Ohlin model, reveal that China is abundant in labor and has a comparative advantage in labor-intensive goods.
China's largest economic sector is its research and development sector. It is supported by a booming and growing economy. China's State Council has put forth government policies that have been encouraging heavy spending, making R&D the top sector in China's spending. There is a heavy focus on science and technology as the development and demand for innovations increases internationally. This sector attracts foreign direct investment due to its intense growth trend.
China's GDP and GDP per capita have been increasing over recent years. In 2009, the GDP was 4,520 billion of US dollars, and this has almost doubled in 2013 to a GDP of 8,230 billion. The GDP per capita, which is measured in PPP, has also been increasing. In 2009, the GDP per capita was 6,747, and in 2012 it increased to 9,083. Their current unemployment rate is 4.1%, and there's been little fluctuation over the years. In 2009, the rate was 4.3%, and in 2012, the rate was 4.1%. This graph shows how China's unemployment rate is relatively constant. Starting from January 2008 and ending in January 2014, there was a low of 4% and a high of 4.3%, a difference of only 0.3%. China's current inflation rate is 2.5%, and there's been little fluctuation since 2012, as there was a low of 1.7% in December 2012 and a high of 3.6% in March 2012. However, the inflation rate did experience greater fluctuation in the past years, from 2010 to 2011, as there is a low of 1.5% in January 2010 and a high of 6.5% in mid-2011.
In 2011, America's anti-China bill, called the Currency Exchange Rate Oversight Reform Act, established a tariff on imports from countries with undervalued currencies. The primary reason for this bill was because of a $270 billion trade deficit with China, rooted in the undervaluation of the yuan compared to the dollar. This gave China exporters a large advantage in the international economy and trade. Furthermore, although China has low tariffs, the nation favors subsidies for domestic companies. The yuan has also had a high rate of growth over the past few years, as it has appreciated 7% against the dollar. One fact worth noting is that China claims that it is highly open in terms of trade rather than highly protectionist. However, in practice, their economy and trade contradict their claims. The new trade theory is applicable with China's government regulation in that the government utilizes protection to encourage the creation of and development of additional industries. Some of these industries are quite small and need assistance growing. This is the infant industry argument.
So China has a lot of trading partners. Just to name a few, the European Union, the United States, Hong Kong, ASEAN, which includes Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, and Japan and South Korea. The European Union is actually China's largest trading partner. China exports machinery, equipment, footwear, clothing, furniture, and toys, while they import machinery, equipment, motor vehicles, aircraft, and chemicals, all part of their intra-industry trade. Despite being the largest trading partner of China, the EU actually records a significant trade deficit with China. This is mainly due to the reflection of global and Asian value chains, but also due to the remaining market access barriers in China today. Here is a short video regarding exports.
China's exports hit a record high in July, with shipments to Europe and the United States proving surprisingly buoyant. Total exports were up almost 20.5% from a year ago, the strongest gain since April.
Foreign direct investment plays an important role for the economic development and export success in China. According to MOFCOM, China's FDI accounts for over half of its exports and imports, which amounted to over $100 billion in 2008. In 2005 to 2010, the FDI accounted for 2.5% of China's GDP. Recently, FDI strategies have begun to focus on environmentally sustainable, energy-efficient, technology-advanced industries. As for the EU invested over 9.9 billion euros in China in 2012, which is a 20% increase from 2011. China's FDI into the EU was 3.5 billion euros in 2012. Given this, Chinese investments into the EU only accounted for 2.2% of total FDI flows into the EU. However, this is in fact a 1.4% increase from 2011.
Migration. Since 2011, a group known as the China's Migrant Population Development has been helping the central government with creating plans for urbanizing and population management. According to this group, only 4.5% of migrants make less than $78 per month, while 20% of migrants can't even afford to work and live in urban areas. Hence, in June 2013, China finally decided to make big plans to move roughly 250 million people from rural areas to big cities, thereby increasing China's urban population and working to build new roads, hospitals, schools, and community centers with the estimated spending of $600 billion. As mentioned before, China is working intensively to migrate people from rural areas to urban areas. Some of the effects that this great migration will cause in China are increase in urban population, higher wages, reduction in poverty, increase in employment, and development of new roads, hospitals, and educational institutes.
An essential piece of China's economic policy is managing the yuan exchange rate to benefit its exports, which make up about 27% of their GDP. China doesn't have a free-floating exchange rate that is determined by market forces, but rather a controlled currency that is tied to the value of other currencies. By maintaining an artificially low value, the Chinese make it possible for other nations to purchase Chinese goods for very low prices. Any fluctuation in the value of the yuan can have drastic effects on China's exports. When their currency appreciates, even if only by a little bit, the demand for their products can drop drastically. Increased competition in the export market from newly industrialized countries like Mexico, India, and Brazil forces China to continuously maintain low prices in order to remain competitive. The Chinese government automatically buys US dollars that Chinese exporters receive in exchange for their goods. They buy these dollars using yuan. In order to constantly buy US dollars, they have to constantly print huge sums of yuan, which causes them 5% or more annual inflation at the consumer level. Essentially, the Chinese exchange rate policies subsidize American consumers, but not the Chinese. This also makes foreign goods far more expensive for the Chinese.
Overall, China's exports are greater than its imports, leading to a trade surplus. To increase trade, the nation has issued reforms for more free trade zones, resulting in fewer regulations and less tariffs. Additionally, China is a fundamentally labor-intensive country. They essentially export the majority of their labor-intensive goods and import capital-intensive goods, per the Heckscher-Ohlin model.
China does experience some losses from world trade. For one, there's a growing trade deficit. As a result, China owns a large amount of debt, and a high percentage of which comes from the United States. Also, intellectual property rights infringement is a serious problem. For instance, in 2012, 64% of fake goods found at the European borders came from China. This shows that China needs further reinforcement in intellectual property rights laws and regulations. Another loss is the fact that foreign companies face a number of trade barriers in China. This is due to increased standards which are hard to meet for foreign competitors and results in a lack of equal competition, subsidies and financing regulations, and standards of trading. In one report, 45% of EU companies operating in China said to have missed business opportunities due to the regulatory barriers. However, there are also benefits from world trade. Due to the large trade activity, there's a lot of foreign direct investment in China, which leads to the economic growth. As a result, the standards of living are rising. Trade is also the main contributor to China's economic success because it allows China to have comparative advantage in goods and focuses on their ability to produce those goods. Other benefits from trade are that it has also led to better reform of regulations, cost reductions, reduced market distortions due to increased competition, and greater variety of goods and services for consumers. And this concludes our project. Thank you for watching.